Oh,
and we'll
that is awesome.
top
When can
forward,
I have
backward, and the bottom.
that? Okay, you better make a bunch of those. Like seriously, just you guys need to make a ton of those right off the bat because that's going to be
All
a huge.
right.
Can you? Oh my gosh.
All right. Hey, everybody. Nick from TriRig here. Today, I've got a special guest on. So, I tend to understand the world of bike fit and aerodynamics from the product and the design side. But today's guest is Jim Manton of Aero Sports. He's been in the bike fit and the aero testing game and at the top of that game for many, many years now. He's worked with athletes of all stripes, from first-time age groupers up to multiple-time world champions. And I thought it would be really interesting to have a chat with Jim about sort of the importance of fit, the evolution of understanding of fit and its relationship to aerodynamics in our sport, and just how equipment plays a role in that evolving understanding and how he works with athletes on a day-to-day basis. So, Jim, thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely,
your website,
my pleasure.
Thank you. Yeah, your website is aero-sports.com,
Correct.
ERO. And at the top of the website, there's a quote from, I think, Dan Empfield from Slow Twitch describing you as one of the top fitters in the world. And so I sort of just would like to know, how did you come to the world of bike fit, and sort of how did that, evolve into velodrome testing and track testing? Because people won't generally find you in a fit studio quite as much maybe as in a velodrome. And so how'd you start that, and how did that journey evolve, and where do you find yourself now?
Wow, that's a very long story. I studied kinesiology in college, but I always had done bike fits for friends, family, teammates, and it was just something I did. Then when I retired from my first career, like all bike geeks, I lived the dream and opened a bike shop. And like all bike geeks, I quickly learned that was a huge mistake. And so the bike shop was actually successful. It's still open today, but I hated owning a bike shop for various reasons. However, my fit business just took off on me, and pretty soon people were coming, literally from all over the world to be fit. And I was lucky enough to be fitting several professionals in both triathlon and cycling, and it just took off. And so when I sold the bike shop, Aero Sports was born. And it was actually called Final Fit at first, and then later Aero Sports, because I was then chosen to be the first person to use the Alpha Mantis track aero system on the velodrome. And so I introduced that to the world, and that has evolved now into outdoor testing, more than velodrome testing now, for various reasons. That was always the goal. People don't understand that about velodrome testing, is that was never meant to be a permanent solution. That was a stopgap while the outdoor sensors were developed. But the outdoor sensors are just way harder than anybody anticipated. So, but now we're there, and we're working a lot outdoors as well. So, through the years, I've just continued to learn and grow my knowledge of bike fit and aerodynamics, and just try to do the best I can. It's never ending. You're constantly learning, you're constantly evolving, and it's a blast. That's what keeps me in it.
Yeah, and so for those that maybe don't understand the science of it, I think the idea is you went to the velodrome because it's a very controlled environment where there isn't the elements outdoors, wind playing a factor, and so if you have at least a power meter on the athlete's bicycle, you can tell exactly how much power they're putting out, and then how long it took them to go around the track is a repeatable number, whereas outdoors, the wind is confounding that measurement based on, whether it's a headwind or a side wind or a tailwind. And so those measurements that you're talking about, or those devices that you're talking about, the Alpha Mantis and its successors, help make outdoor testing hopefully as repeatable as velodrome testing. Is that right, or am I missing some pieces?
That's correct. So in the end, all of it is what's called virtual elevation, or some people refer to it as the Chung method from Robert Chung at the University of California, Berkeley. But in the end, when it's dumbed down, when it's simplified to its easiest to understand form, is we're measuring how much power is it taking you to go whatever speed you're going, right? And so if you are going 25 miles an hour for 300 watts and we make a change and now you're going 25 miles for 290 watts, well, then we know we saved you that many watts in drag. And so that's a very, very simplified way to explain it. And we don't really care how fast you're going. We don't care how much power you're putting out. We like it to be pretty consistent, but in the end, it's just figuring out how much power is it taking you to go the speed you're going. And then we are able that there's a known algorithm that people use to figure out what's called your CDA, or coefficient of drag area. And so that's what the velodrome system really it finally brought aero testing to the general public, and anybody could do it. It has its own difficulties, but yeah, it was a controlled environment. There's no wind there other than the air that you're affecting as you ride through it. So we were able to control for that, and then it was just doing several laps and measuring the power versus speed. But again, the ultimate goal was always to be outside. That was always the ultimate goal. It just took longer and was much more difficult than anyone ever knew. I think if people would have known how hard it was, no one would have ever started it and tried it. Garmin actually gave up. Garmin bought Alpha Mantis eventually, and they just gave up. They finally just said, never mind.
Oh, wow.
So it's really a bunch of small manufacturers that are now putting out these sensors, and some are better than others. We're not, I don't think they're quite ready for prime time yet. For the average consumer to use, I really just don't think they're there yet, but they're getting closer and closer.
So I tend to tell people that, the game of bike fit, or the world of bike fit as it relates to competitive athletics, at least, is a balancing of the power that you're outputting, the comfort that you're able to experience while you're putting out that power at that bike fit, and then the aerodynamic drag. And so you're trying to maximize the power and the comfort, and you're trying to minimize the drag. Yep. So let's say an athlete comes to you. What's the process? So let's say unknown athlete, you get a call, someone comes into you and wants to get the Jim Manton bike fit. What's your process?
So we evaluate the position they're in first, and then we offer a couple different services now. But as just a regular bike fit, I evaluate that position for saddle position, which meaning height and fore and aft. I'm evaluating their aero position for both reach, the height, the width of their aero position, and then we start making adjustments from there. We have so much data, and so we use that normative data to understand the ranges people should be in. What we're trying to do with whether it's saddle height or hip angle or fore and aft position or your shoulder angle for reach to your aero bars, we're trying to not just get you in range, we're trying to figure out where in that range do you perform best. And this is all without aero testing at all. This is all just getting you comfortable in your aero position, right? Because our goal is always to give you a position that you can sustain for the entirety of your bike leg. That's always the ultimate goal. And so comfort is really the key. And luckily, it just so happens that usually the most comfortable position is pretty darn close to the most aerodynamic position as well. Now, we're not, even when we aero test, we're not going for ultimate aero. I always say, especially for triathletes, by the way, I always say, my job is to make you a better triathlete, not a better cyclist, right? And so it's all about economy of effort. So yeah, I can put you in a super aero position, but you might not be able to run off that position. You might not be able to sustain that position. People forget that time trialists in the world of pro cycling, they do very short efforts relatively, speaking to triathletes, compared to triathletes. So their efforts are 20, 30, sometimes 40 kilometers, but it's usually pretty short and it's all out. We don't care about comfort. We're after power and we're after aerodynamics. And then they get to collapse into the arms of a masseuse after the finish line, right? They don't have to do anything afterwards. Well,
yeah, a lot of people have said, like, who cares what saddle you're on for a time trial? If you're putting out 450 watts, you're not on it. Right? Yes. You don't feel it because your legs are putting out so much power. You're basically suspended.
And again, we don't, there's obviously some work in that regard because you can't be tortured. But yeah, you're right. You're putting out so much power that you're just not feeling it. I mean, there's so much more pain from the effort that you're putting out that you don't really notice anything else. And so yeah, we're after ultimate power and ultimate aero for a time trialist, but for a triathlete, that is not true at all. We need comfort.
Right.
You need to be able to sustain that position, and you should get out of your aero position on a tri bike and really not like that position at all. It should be a relief to get back into your aero position. That's where you should want to ride your bike.
There we go.
So we're not after ultimate drag, but again, it just so happens that some of the best aero positioning we do is also the most comfortable positioning we do, and so that
I want to back up 1 second for a point you just made that I think is really critical to underline. You were saying, I think the triathlete should not want to be out on the hoods, on their brake levers, right? That it should be a relief to come back into aero, that you should be so comfortable in that position that that's where you want to be. That if you're coming out to brake or corner or climb or something, that when that's over, you should be really happy to get back into your home position because it's that good and that comfortable. I think that's something that's commonly not understood, and I think that's really important to underline.
It should literally be a relief to get back into your aero position. You should love it, and it's one of the most misunderstood things about triathlon and triathlon positioning. It should feel great to be in your aero position, and
if not, then your fit is wrong or your equipment is wrong. Okay, yeah,
it's interesting. I've really struggled with bike fit education, and you go to a triathlon, and because my wife does triathlons, and I'll go to an event, and I'll just see 99 out of 100 people are in just horrible positions, and yet they've been to a bike fit, and you're like, how did that happen? And so I do feel like it's not the fault of the athlete, I think, and it's not necessarily even the fault of the fitter. I just don't think we're doing a great job educating people on how to do proper tri-fits, and I don't know the exact answer to how we fix that, but it just seems to be at some point we have to blame the education and not the fitter and not the athlete. So because everybody wants to do it correctly, so why aren't we doing it correctly? One of my favorite triathlon photographers is Scott Flathouse. He has a really popular Instagram, and he posts photos every day of athletes, and virtually every single one is in a terrible position. It's very rare that he posts a picture of someone in a good position, and they're uncomfortable. You can tell they're uncomfortable, and they just assume, well, of course it's uncomfortable. I'm riding an Aero. And you go, no, it actually should be just the opposite. It should feel great to be an Aero. So
I want to return to something else that you were saying. Okay, so we look at the athlete in the position that they're in, and we're going to move them until they're within sort of the orthodox ranges of what we understand good bike fit are, because we have this great historical data, we have really good physiology understanding, etc. At the risk of going too far afield too early, but those understandings also get pushed and experimented on, and there are athletes who, especially currently, a modern trend is athletes really trying to chase reach, and they're pushing their elbows further out and they're tilting up, and orthodox understandings might say that's wrong, and yet a lot of these athletes are finding success with it. I think you can do it in such a way that you're sort of falling into the cups in a way that's comfortable, that gets you both forward and down and simultaneously closes the aero bag a little bit. So I can see you nodding. I understand you agree.
Yes.
What the question is, where are the limits between those two things, between our orthodox understanding of what bike fit is and sort of these experimentations of what could be, and how do we evaluate whether those experiments are successful or not, and how does that play into your day-to-day work?
It's a really good question. It's something we're struggling with right now. I love reach. My whole thing is you reach as far as you can until it's no longer comfortable, until you no longer have skeletal support of your upper body. what people find is the more they reach, the more comfortable they are. It relaxes your shoulders and your neck. It allows you to look forward easier. And they're always, so there's been this myth for years. And I think this is one of these things that's propagated by the internet, and it just goes wild, where everybody thinks your upper arm should be perpendicular to the ground.
Yeah.
And
It's got to be going down.
Absolutely not true. That is a horrible aero position. You have virtually no skeletal support there at all. Your deltoid muscles are really what's supporting you at that point. And that's why you get sore in your shoulders and you get sore in your neck, because it just drives your shoulders up into your neck, and you can't even look up and you can't move your head, and it's super uncomfortable. And then as you get people to reach out, all of a sudden they're just like, wow, that is so comfortable.
Yeah.
And so, that has just continued to evolve over the years, and bike fit should evolve. Our understanding of bike fit should evolve. And so, and it's gotten to be more extreme lately. I think you can go too far with it. You really can. But what we found is that you reach as far as you can until you lose that skeletal support. And it's much further than I think any of us, maybe even 10 years ago, realized. And so I've always pushed reach, but it's just more and more all the time. But then we have the struggle of, how do we get that reach? Because these bikes are not designed for this amount of reach at all. And so, and I also think, by the way, the reason we're able to reach out so much more is because we're starting to have full forearm support, right? That's really, I think, what's allowing it. Once you give someone full forearm support, instead of that little pad just right here, you're supporting their entire forearm. Well, that changes the game completely, because it gives them much more upper body support when they're able to just lay down on those aero bars. The first time someone does it, it's fun to watch them, because they lay down in the aero position. So if we have our fit bike, or even we put them on their bike, they lay down on those long arm pads, and they're just shocked at how much better it feels, and they're able to just completely relax into their position. And so so equipment is in some ways allowing us to get more reach, while I would say the frames on the bikes are not following. The manufacturers have been slow to respond to this. And so we have to come up with really creative ways to get this reach, sometimes ridiculous. And by the way, we start getting weight too far out in front of the bike. So we're kind of getting in the weeds here. But, we have to take all of these things into account. Now, the way we're able to know that that's better is, one, we certainly rely on feedback from the athlete. I think it's so important to listen to the athlete and what they're saying. They might not always understand what they're saying, so you've got to, one, know how to pull it out of them, and two, understand what they're telling you. But that's certainly one of the ways we know it works. And then, of course, we can quantify it aerodynamically. We can quantify it through power. It's, as we tend to get that athlete to reach out further, it kind of rotates their pelvic structure. It aligns their greater trochanter of their femur and their hip, and all of a sudden they're putting out more power. Their knee tracking is better. Like, you see all of these things happen as we get that reach. It's just, there's always, as much as we want to drill everything down and just make it all about numbers, there's an art to this, because every person is different. And so, bike fit is a combination of art and science, right? There is an art form to it, and the best fitters are usually kind of artists as well. And so you have to understand both sides of it. And but now we can quantify it through aero testing, and then listening to the athletes. So it's really fun. It's completely changed. So have saddle heights, by the way. Saddle heights are much lower than they were. You go back to watch, Lance Armstrong, back in the late 90s and early 2000s.
We got some toe pointers back then.
Totally different, much higher saddle heights, much further back on road bikes. But even triathletes back then had much higher saddle heights. So saddle heights are lower. We have a better understanding of biomechanics now because of motion capture and because of power meters. And so, all of this evolves, and it should continue to evolve. It's like, for instance, and again, I don't want to get too deep in the weeds, so you can stop me, but, we used to always try to get the back angle lower. And what we found is that's really not the best way to lower drag. So you notice a lot of these top elite athletes, they're going longer, but they're also going up a little bit, in height. And we can really get into the weeds on this, but they're not dropping lower and lower. They're actually coming up a little bit, and we're not really losing anything aerodynamically by doing that.
No, because they're getting their head down at the same time,
Exactly
right? And
right.
that's sort of the key. And now the head's in line with the back, whether that back is, 10 or 20 millimeters higher than it used to be, the head went down 100 millimeters, so you're way faster.
Way faster. It's getting your head out of the wind is one of the most, excuse me, is one of the most important things we can do.
Yeah.
And we need, and we want that to be a natural thing, right? To ask a triathlete to pull their head down and shrug for the entirety of their bike leg, it's just not realistic. It has to be natural. And that's one of the things that Reach does for us, is it just naturally brings the head down. And so the athlete doesn't feel like they're even trying to get their head lower. It just happens for them.
So as you're doing this, so 2 questions. Number 1, what is it that the amateur triathlete can do? Okay, let's say they say, okay, I think I understand the theory here. I want to try and experiment with this on my own. How can they start doing that? Sort of what equipment is out there that can help them try to experiment with this and get better forearm support, etc., without necessarily dropping $2,000 on a custom extension? And number 2, as you look at the equipment landscape today, what is it that manufacturers could be doing better to help support this regime or support the work that you do? You've mentioned you'd like to see longer bike frames with more reach, but apart from that, what are those 2 things? So what can consumers buy now, and what should manufacturers be focusing on in the future?
So one of the struggles we have now, sorry for my cough, is so many of these bikes have proprietary front ends, and we can't just put a longer stem on the bike anymore. That just doesn't, it's just, for a lot of these bikes, it's just no longer realistic, because the Aero bar and the stem are all one piece. It looks beautiful. And so now we have to rely on the adjustment of the Aero bar. Well, some manufacturers have more adjustments than others. So we've really then begun to rely on aftermarket parts. So, and not to, make this a commercial about TriRig, but, one of my favorite pieces are the closed back TriRig scoops, and really the Scoops SL. I love those things. And because when you get that closed back, it forces the elbow forward instead of, resting on the pad with your elbow slightly behind. Now, if this is the back of the pad, your elbow's forward of it. And people find that incredibly uncomfortable when they have that closed back and that elbow just rests down inside that cup. All of a sudden, they have all this support, and they can even kind of, when they really need to put power down, they can kind of pull back a little bit. And so that is easily one of our favorite ways of doing it, is getting a closed back cup. And so, but the Scoops are one of the few that are closed back and provide full forearm support. There's just not a lot of options out there for that. And both of those things are really key for us. And then, and again, that's so funny. I just thought about this right now. Our other issue becomes, what extensions do we use? Because we start running out of length with extensions as well. And so it's so funny. You guys put out these really long extensions. And so those work for us as well. And so because we're just trying to get this reach, and because we can't do it from the frame, and because we can't do it from the Aero bar itself, we have to use these parts. And so, and you'll see all kinds of aftermarket stuff coming out, and some of it works better than others, but you also need to keep it as simple as possible, and also as structurally sound as possible. Because we can do, and I have done some crazy stuff, but you're kind of like going, man, I don't know about this. This is a little, unsafe on how we're doing it.
Yeah.
And so you have to, it has to be structurally sound. And so, one of the ways we misuse TriRig products all the time, by the way, is we take the wing extenders and we turn them to get more length instead of working on width. We're going on length.
Yeah.
And we probably shouldn't use it for that, but it works, and it gets us length all the time, especially the new XLs. Oh my gosh, that gives us even more opportunity. And so I don't know, you tell me, you might cringe at that and go, oh God, that's not what I designed those for, Jim. But we use them. I can tell you, I never use them for width. I only use them for length. And I do it every day.
Yeah, the originals were designed as with either extenders or flip them inward and make yourself go narrower if your bars weren't letting you get as narrow. But we learned from you and other people around the world that that's another use case. And so when we designed the Wingspan XL, it was with that use case in mind, to allow additional reach, and that's why they're longer and wider. And then the bolt spacing on the Wingspan XL changes so that as you flip the orientation, you retain really good options for bolt spacing in any orientation.
Which is fantastic, by the way. That was the first time I used them. I'm like, oh, thank God. These are what I've been looking for. These are what I've been waiting for. And you do feel more comfortable using those for length. One, because the bolt spacing does line up, right? Where we were getting creative. We were pulling out thermals. We were doing all kinds of stuff we probably shouldn't do before. Now everything lines up. So you're like, okay, now I feel good about this.
Yeah. But I think knowing that people are really pushing this reach agenda, I think there's room for better reinforced products that don't make you have that sort of, ooh, well, we're really pushing it this time. And so I think that's helpful, one. And number two, what you were just saying about closed back scoops, I had never thought of either. So originally, the idea with a closed back scoop is to provide elbow support, obviously, in addition to the forearm support that the cup is offering. But I had never thought of it as a way to force someone forward, as you just said, because it's true, you can't go further back. Right. For some athletes, that's a drawback of a closed back scoop, that now I can't do this adjustment. But I guess from the fitter's perspective, that's the chef's kiss to this thing is you can't go further back. You have to be here where I want you, and then you'll adapt to that position and get the benefits out of it that it's designed for.
So the way I work with closed back scoops, and I work almost exclusively with closed back scoops. I'll be honest with you, I don't remember the last time I ordered open back scoops, right? Like we put closed back scoops on, and then I give the back of the scoop is sort of the shortest reach I want that athlete to use, but I also always give them a little bit of room to kind of move forward, right? So I give them, because you don't want just one singular position that the athlete must stay in at all times. So we give them a little room to move fore and aft, which is super helpful to the athlete. So, we tell them, hey, if you're on a long straight into a headwind, you get as long as you can get, because you're going to get more and more aero the longer you get. So we get them that way, but that might not be sustainable, or when you start going up a slight incline, you might want to come back a little bit. But either way, it's more reach than I think most people, even most fitters, understand. And again, so I don't want to blame the athlete. So as an athlete, what do you do? Well, really it's something like the closed back scoop that you need to try, but you also need to get your extensions far enough out as well. So those are the two, and really, I know when we talk triathlon, nothing is quite inexpensive, but those are the two least expensive ways to do it. Because everything else, what are you going to do? Change your entire cockpit? Well, that's an option, and there are some good options out there, but realistically, if you're just trying it until you find your final position, you either do that or you go to a fitter who has a fit bike who can, dial in that position. It's one of the two, but I'll be honest, there probably aren't a lot that really understand this and understand to do it. And because it's not being taught anywhere. So, it's a struggle, that it's funny. I had actually retired from bike fitting for a while, and I was only doing aero testing. And I've just recently come back to just standard bike fitting as well. And part of it was to come up with a solution. Like, how do we figure out a way to get this information into the hands of fitters who want to do a good job? They do. They want to do a good job. They just haven't been taught how to do it properly, or they don't understand it yet. And so, that's one of the reasons I came back is, how do I solve for this? And I haven't figured it out yet, by the way, but I want to figure it out.
When was that transition, when going back to just traditional fitting over?
About 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
So, part of it was, we were retiring. Our kids were all off to college. And at one point we had 4 in college at once. Now we have 3 in college and 2 out. But part Part of it was, hey, let's retire. Let's retire early and live this great life. But my wife owns a tri team and she has a master swim program and she loves it. And so she wasn't retiring. So I'm like, okay, well, what am I going to do? And so
there you go.
I got into some other hobbies that cost a lot of money. So I thought, well, maybe I need to pay for these a little bit.
There you go.
But I also truly missed it. I missed the interaction with the client. I really love that. And so it's funny now, having been back probably 3 weeks now, it's so much fun. I missed all that interaction and talking to the clients and watching them as you get them into comfortable position. They're just like, wow, I had no idea I could be this comfortable on a tri-bike. And so, it's just been a blast. Now, what I changed was I am no longer at the velodrome because that was a long commute for me. I didn't want to do it anymore. And, it's LA traffic. I didn't want it. So I'm actually now working out of my home. And
all right.
So I have my home fit studio and I love it. And just having a blast doing it. So yeah, it's really fun.
And is the difference there basically that the aero testing is bike fit plus how it's working out in the real world, and bike fit alone is we're just subtracting the aero component basically?
Yeah, it's funny. I tell people all the time, I can get you about 95% of the way there just with bike fit. I know what works and I know what doesn't. And I've had the incredible luck to be able to have access to a wind tunnel just south of me. And I was the velodrome tester here in North America at the LA Velodrome. And I was the first person to actually use a sensor outdoors. So I've been incredibly lucky. And so I've just gathered all this experience and I use that in the fit studio. So I'll get you most of the way there. If you want, if you really want the ultimate, then we'll add aero testing to the game and quantify every change we make from there. That's really my goal there is, hey, if we go out a little further or up or down or more narrow, let's quantify those changes. Let's not just do it in here and hope it's more aero. Let's actually know that this works better for you. And by the way, allow that athlete to feel it in the real world, because in the end, the fit studio is static, right? And so you're not really riding your bike. You're riding on either on a fit bike or on your bike on a trainer. It's a very static environment. And so what we really want is for you to feel that in the real world. And one of these days, I'll have a motion capture system that I can capture your biomechanics while you ride your bike in the real world. But that's, that technology is finally probably mature. It's now we got to bring it down to a price point. But either way, I like you to feel it in the real world while I'm measuring it. And it's been fantastic to do it that way. So the athlete, does their aero test, they come back, give us feedback, and then we have a number for them. And so we might not choose the most aero position. It could be that, hey, this position is a little less aero, but clearly more comfortable for you. So in the end, it's probably more aero overall because you can stay in that aero position comfortably. So we're choosing that position. And then, of course, we can test clothing and helmets and all that stuff as well.
Yeah.
So,
or if you're giving up 5 watts of aero, but you produce 10 more watts of power, then it's
absolutely. And so that's the other part of the aero equation is, for instance, everybody wants to put their hydration and nutrition in the most aero place, but they don't think about how they use it. And how you use it could destroy any aero gains you found and then some, or keep you from actually getting all the hydration and nutrition you need to begin with. And so it's not just about what's most aero, it's how you use it as well.
Yeah, I've got this perfect saddle bottle, but it takes me a minute and a half to get the bottle out and back in. So it's like, you've just ruined the whole thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And people don't realize as well, by the way, that when you come out of aero and get back into aero, it takes some time for that air to settle back around you. So you're un-aero for longer than you were out of your aero position. It takes a bit before that air settles in around you again. So every time you get out of aero, you're not aero for longer than you were out of aero. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, if you visualize it as water moving over something, I think that helps people because air essentially is a fluid. It just, it's invisible. And Jim, I could keep talking to you for another 2 hours, but I think I've taken up so much of your time. I just want to show you something, or a couple of things that we're working on. The audience is going to get some blurred out images, but
Great.
There's a couple things I want to show you.
Can I tell a story before you do this?
Please.
So, do you remember when we met?
When you came to my house?
No, we met at the King Kamehameha Hotel in 2017 during Kona Week. And you showed me the drawings for a new Aero bar. And I will, so this moment is kind of reminding me of that, because I'll never forget when you showed me the drawings for the Alpha One.
Okay.
And I looked at you, and I think I told you even in that moment, this is the greatest Aero bar I've ever seen in my life. And to this day, it's the greatest Aero bar ever made. No, and I'm not just saying, I've told many people
Very
this.
kind.
So I'm not just saying this because we're talking together right now. I've told this to hundreds of people, thousands probably. It's to this day, it is the greatest Aero bar ever made. Still is. No one else touches it. People have tried to copy it as much as they can. But yeah, I'll never forget that moment. That's when we met.
Well, thank you. Someone recently told me you had called it God's gift to bike fitters. And so I said, does that make me God?
It is, absolutely. Think about it. You put that on a bike and you just turn that bike basically into a fit bike, right? Because
that's the idea.
There's so much adjustment to it. And it just is every bike fitter's dream to be able to have that on a bike. We're actually we've been waiting for this guy to get a couple parts on his bike. We're putting the Alpha One on the new Cervelo P Series. And I think that is going to be a really cool combination. So that should be, I'm hoping tomorrow. Is today Wednesday? No. Yeah, today's Wednesday.
Yes.
So we're hoping he's ready tomorrow, and we're going to get out there and aero test him. And the cool thing for him is he's never had a bike with enough reach. And so now he's got both the frame and then this Aero bar that's finally going to get him into a really good position, which, by the way, I'm a little conflicted by. He's one of my test riders for our YouTube channel where we aero test stuff. And he's been my one rider who's sort of got short reach and sitting upright. And so
you can't use him as the bad example. Yeah.
But he's finally going to get fixed.
Well, the dream for me is to have people like you and athletes benefit from the product. So thank you so much for all the kind words.
I'm probably a bigger fan than you realize.
Well, I really appreciate it. So this is going to be our next generation.
Oh, that is awesome. When can I have that? Okay, you better make a bunch of those. Like, seriously, just... You guys need to make a ton of those right off the bat, because that's going to be.
All right.
Can you? Oh my gosh, that is so cool. Yeah. I will do any aero testing you need done. Just tell me. That is so awesome.
That's my soundbite, man. No, thank you. Thank you so much for those of you who didn't. None of you. For the audience, Jim had to delay this interview by a day because he woke up and had no voice. And so I want to express my deep gratitude for coming on sick and still coughing. So if you hear the odd cough in the interview.
The first thing that goes anytime I get a cold is my voice. It just goes like that. So that was my nightmare. I wake up and I have no voice. I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do?
No.
So no, that's exciting stuff. And what you guys have been doing the last few years and how much, you just listen. It's one of our struggles is we see how things are evolving, and, the big players, the Treks, the Specialized, they're not listening. They're not paying attention. I don't know. And so we rely on companies like TriRig that are watching what's going on and going, hey, we can help with that. We can actually make products to get these athletes to achieve what they're trying to achieve. And so it's so helpful to us, because otherwise we wouldn't be able to do any of these things that we're doing without kind of custom CNCing things, which is impossible for each athlete. We wouldn't be able to do the things we're doing, and these athletes wouldn't be able to achieve these positions and this comfort. None of it would be possible. And so, man,
thank you.
Around.
No, it's our whole mission. We love doing this. We love and we can't do it without people like you and the athletes you work with putting this stuff to the test and checking it out and using it both in the ways that we think of and the ways we don't think of. Like
probably ways you're like, oh God, don't do that.
No, I've never felt that way. I've always been excited to see this stuff.
That's good. Sometimes it's so funny. No kidding, Nick. Sometimes when I'm doing it, I'm thinking, Nick would kill me if he knew I'm doing this right now.
No.
Like, I'm not kidding you. You know, I'm creating all this reach. I'm going, Nick would just cringe right now if he saw what I'm doing. I'm not even going to put this on Instagram because they'll probably yell at me.
No. And if you think of anything for the secret things I just showed you, don't hesitate to reach out and tell me this would be cooler if it blank. Whatever.
Oh, no, absolutely. It's funny. You know, I can think of lots of stuff, but every time you guys, you know, you're the one designing it. I know it's like, wow, how did I not think of that? Like, that is brilliant. Like what you just showed me, and I'm not sure how much I can describe it. Holy cow, that is so brilliant. And again, it's just simple. It's like, oh, it's like the Alpha One. Like, how did no one think to make such a simple, elegant aero bar? Like, it's just like, here we are 8 years later almost, and it's no one's beat it. No one's designed anything close to it. And so, yeah, no, I love what you do. Because again, it's part science and it seems to be part art for you as well, because the designs are just too beautiful not to have that kind of creativity involved in it. There's just no way.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jim. I appreciate it so much. Okay, where can people find out more about you? It's Aero Sports, ERO-sports.com.
Yep.
Anywhere else?
Instagram's Aero Sports without the dash. And then I started this YouTube channel called Faster Fiction, and it's been way harder than I ever thought. And people are begging me for more videos, but we do have more videos coming out with Faster Fiction, I promise. It's just been much more difficult than I thought it would be, and much more work. And I didn't realize how popular it would become so quickly. So Faster Fiction is the YouTube channel, and we have a bunch of stuff planned for that over the next 6 months.
Awesome. We'll get the links posted. We definitely need to do this again. I think I got to maybe like a third of what I wanted to talk to you about.
Oh my gosh. Anytime. Awesome. We'll get into the weeds anytime you want, man. I just love it. And hey, I don't profess to know everything, by the way. I continue to learn every single day. The moment you think you know what you're talking about, especially when it comes to aerodynamics, you're just asking to be made a fool of. It's just going to happen to you.
But the learning is what makes it so much fun.
It's so much fun. I tell people all the time, aero testing is so much fun, but you often come away with more questions than you answered. Isn't
that the truth? Yep. So I'll ask you more questions next time. Jim, thank you so much.
Anytime.